today, tomorrow, throughout the week. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He represents the 16th District in Illinois, and I just want to get your perspective, yes, on this, what we've seen over the last week on the ground on that U.S.-Mexico border, but also what we've seen in Capitol Hill. You've read the president's tweets. His indication, his belief that it doesn't seem like we'll get some sort of immigration reform passed before the midterm elections. How do you respond to that? I look at sort of what you've had to say. I look at your policy statement on immigration. You're somebody who says he supports common sense reform to these laws. How dispiriting is it? That's the word I'm going to use. You can use another one if you want to have the president not in your corner, not backing the House, not backing House Republicans as they try to come up with some legislation that's palatable to the majority of your caucus.
Well, the president did tell us he backs us 1,000% in fixing this. Didn't take his tweet as saying he's not going to support what we do, but he was just kind of like, let's move on. I know there's a lot of tweets I can't really defend. That's one of them. We're going to do this anyway. We're going to continue to do what we need to do next week and hopefully pass a bill that secures our border. I've been to McAllen, Texas, by the way. I'm an Air National Guard pilot. I have worked the border of McAllen. There is a lack of border security there, and there is drugs and illegal immigrants that pour across that border. We do need border security, but we also need to fix the situation with family separation with a legislative solution. We need to fix the DACA issue with a long pathway to citizenship. So I think we can do all this. But look, if there's people that think that we don't need border security, or that if you're coming here from a different country, you have as much of a right to be in this country as somewhere else, that's going to be an area where we're never going to be able to meet in the middle of.
What have your constituents from Rockford or Ashton said to you about what they've seen over this last week? These images have been indelible. There have been people from across the political spectrum upset with what they've seen, upset with, in principle, what's happening here, these families being ripped apart. What have you heard from your constituents? And how does that make you regard the White House and this policy in particular?
Well, I've heard a lot from my constituents, and the people that are reaching out are the ones that are opposed to the idea of family separation. And that's part of the reason I came out, also because of my own personal views, and said we need to put an end to this. We need to find a solution. But that solution isn't that we just simply release people into the United States and give them a promise of a court date in 12 months, because then they don't come back. And again, people, unless you're a citizen or you're here on a legal process, you don't have a right to be in this country. And so having that security is important. I also hear from people the fact that we do need border security. So I look at this and say, I think there's areas, frankly, both sides can really meet in the middle, get some long-term agreement on this. You know, I wish the president would tweet more support about what we're trying to do in the House. But that said, we're going to do it anyway and hopefully get this thing, which I think is a pretty good bill, passed this week.
I don't know if you've seen George Will's latest column for the Washington Post, but in his typical way, in his florid prose, he's talked about what we've seen play out in Washington over these last many months when it comes to immigration. I'm going to read a little bit from it here. The Congressional Republican caucuses must be substantially reduced, he writes, so substantially that their remnants reduced to minorities will be stripped of the Constitution's Article I powers, that they've been too invertebrate to use against the current wielder of Article II powers, saying Congress, Article I, isn't standing up to the president, Article II. He's calling you spineless. He's saying Republicans are spineless. They're too subservient to this president. How do you respond to what George Will has to say?
No, I completely disagree with what he has to say. If you look at a lot of Republicans, they're willing, including me, when necessary, to call out the president. I did the same thing under President Obama. They'll support the president when they can. I actually did the same thing with President Obama, supported him in a number of areas I agreed with him. To say that we need to lose the majority to kind of teach us a lesson, well, I think as a Republican that believes in Republican things, yeah, it may teach us a lesson, but there's also going to be a lot of losses we have, and, you know, he's a Democrat, it's going to be a lot of gains for them. So I disagree with George Will. I do think as Congress, as Article I, we need to stand for our rights. We need to stand and be an important part of government. And that is hopefully what we're going to be able to do this week when we take on this very difficult issue of immigration that really hasn't been dealt with in decades.
Last question here. You mentioned you were in the Air National Guard. You're in the U.S. Air Force. There is this plan being floated that the Defense Department would take on the care for 20,000 migrants. How comfortable are you with that, with migrants, be they children or adults, being housed on, cared for on military bases in this country?
I'm actually comfortable with it because military bases are really nice, and I guarantee you they're going to take care of them. Some people try to make this sound ominous because it's a military base, but if anybody's ever been on a military base, you'll see it's just like a community. The difference and the reason this is beneficial is because obviously it's under federal control, and they can control what the area looks like and everything, so I'm not uncomfortable with it at all because I think, frankly, it'll be a better situation than if they were housed in temporary housing that actually isn't near as good.
All right, the congressman from Illinois, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican congressman, thank you very much for the time on this
Thanks for
Saturday.